is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the Saturday of the weekend with Jesus, that we have Good Friday and Easter Sunday. We talk about those fairly often, so we're going to talk about Saturday and kind of what happens in between the two of those days. So the scripture that we're looking at today, well, actually for some context, we start on Thursday night. So if we look at Thursday night, we had the Last Supper. Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane and is arrested. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Friday, Jesus is tried in the early hours of the morning. He's crucified, which we talked about last week at PM. And then we're going to talk about what happens Friday night, what happens Saturday, because we know on Sunday morning, which we celebrate on Easter, that Jesus is resurrected. All right, so we start in Matthew chapter 27, verse 57. Could someone read? The text is going to be on the screen. Could someone read that for me? Thanks, Noah.
When it was in evening, there came a rich man from
Arimathea.
named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus.
Yes. So we're picking up the story on Friday night. Jesus has just been crucified, and I like that's Joseph of Arimathea, which I think is kind of a fun picture of him. He looks very stoic. So we see, we learn a few things about Joseph of Arimathea from this text, but we also see that he is described in the other Gospels also, so we learn more things about him from the different Gospels. So we know that he's a Pharisee, which is one of the religious leaders. He is a secret follower of Jesus. We learn in one of the other Gospels, it says that he objected to the crucifixion. He was part of that group of religious leaders, but he's like, I don't think we should crucify this guy. And he was wealthy, we see here, and then he was from Arimathea, which is a town that we think is like 20 kilometers from Jerusalem, where we are right now. So we're going to think about for a minute what it means that Joseph was a secret follower or a secret disciple of Jesus. An interesting thing we see is that Joseph was not public about that. He was he was secret. He didn't tell people that he was a follower of Jesus. It wasn't well known. So in your groups, after your discussion groups, you guys are going to talk about what does it mean to be a secret disciple of Jesus, and what does it mean to be really honest and open about the fact that we are followers of Jesus, and how that is different. The other interesting thing about Joseph of Arimathea is that he was wealthy and he was a religious leader. And so because of that, he had access to Pontius Pilate. So Pontius Pilate was a very high leader, and because Joseph had authority and wealth and all these things, he was able to get access to Pilate to ask for Jesus' body, which is a very unique thing. So he had this privilege and was able to use that to be able to do something for Jesus, right, to serve him in that way. So we're going to continue in the story and see when Jesus asks that. So Matthew 27, verses 58 and 59. Who would like to read that for us? Thanks.
He went to Pilate and asked for the body, and Pilate ordered it to be given to him. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean lined
Shroud.
and laid it in his own new tomb, which had cut in the rock.
Yeah, which he had cut in the rock. Someone else want to read 60? Yeah, thanks.
And he rolled a great stone to the entrance of the tomb and went to it.
Yes. So we see here what I referred to earlier, that Joseph went to Pilate, asked for his body, and put it in his own tomb, and rolled this big stone. So this is kind of a cool image of the what the tomb probably looks like, what archaeologists think. So this is just a cutout so you can see what the inside of it would have looked like. And this is the massive stone right there that would have been rolled in front of the opening to the tomb. So it was a very secure thing. And the other interesting thing we see is that this is fulfilling prophecy that was made in the Old Testament about something that would happen later. So we see in Isaiah 53, verse 9, it says, he was assigned a grave with the wicked, but he was a rich man at his death, because he was with the rich man at his death, because he had done no violence and had not spoken deceitfully. So we see that there was a prophecy there that was fulfilled, that it would be a rich person who would give him his grave that he would be in. And we see that over and over again throughout the Old Testament. There's all these things that talked about what Jesus' life and death and resurrection would be like, which we're going to talk about next week at AM. All the ways we see those being fulfilled through the person of Jesus. All right, so that was all that happened on Friday night. We see Joseph of Arimathea took the body, put it in the grave, and that happened Friday night because their Sabbath was actually on Saturday. So our Sabbath is Sunday, right, the day that we go to church and we rest and all those things. So their Sabbath was on Saturday. So they got the burial done before then, and then we see what's going to happen on Saturday. So we're going to continue. We have a text continuing in Matthew chapter 27, verse 63. Someone like to read this? Thank you.
The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember how that impostor said, while he was still alive, after 3 days I will rise."
Yeah, so we see that they're referring to, hey, remember when Jesus said, after 3 days I'm going to rise again? So he had told the people beforehand, a couple different occasions. One time he said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will rebuild it. Another verse we're going to look at in a second is Jesus telling them beforehand what was going to happen. So you see Pilate and the chief priests and Pharisees remember those things that Jesus had said. He said, we think that something's going to happen here. And the next verse, verse 64, says, can I get someone else to read this? Thank you, Casey.
Therefore, order the tomb to be made secure until the third day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people he is risen from the dead. And the last fraud will be worse than the first.
Awesome. And then the next and last verse we have is, so Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers, go, make it as secure as you can." So they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting a guard. And so a guard of soldiers would probably be 16 Roman soldiers, which is what we have an actual photograph from that era. Apparently, it's a reenactment of soldiers to be in front of the tomb. So what do you guys think that Pilate was expecting? So we have a couple different groups here: Pontius Pilate and the chief priests and Pharisees, and then the disciples. What do you think they were expecting would happen? Yeah.
Or did he say, like, steal it?
Yeah, so Pontius Pilate said their disciples are going to come, steal the body, and then say that Jesus rose from the dead. Other things of what Pontius Pilate or the chief priests were expecting? I think that's a big one. What about the disciples? What do you think the disciples, who were the followers of Jesus, what do you think they were expecting? So Friday night, they just saw the Jesus be crucified, the person they've been following for all these years. It's Saturday, he's dead, he's buried, and they're hanging out, right? What do you think that they are expecting in this time?
I would imagine they were expecting nothing to happen. Jesus would stay dead, and they would be hunted down and slaughtered as insurrectionists by the Roman governor Pilate and by the chief priests and Pharisees.
Yeah, I think that we see later in the text, after Jesus is raised from the dead, there's some women who go to the tomb, they see him, and they run back to the disciples, and they're like, guys, Jesus is risen. He's not dead anymore. He's risen from the dead. And they're all like, nah, I don't think so. We see the text says that they don't believe the women that he's actually risen from the dead, and they run to go get to the tomb. And it's very funny. One of the accounts talks about the two guys running to get to the tomb, and he's like, it makes note of which one got there first. Like it was a race. He's like, but the one that Jesus loved got there first. You're a fast runner. But so we see that the disciples, they probably did not. It looks like they did not expect Jesus to be risen from the dead, which is so interesting because they've been with Jesus for 3 years, walking with him, learning from him, hearing him teach all of these things, and he said to them, on a couple of different occasions, I'm going to rise from the dead. I'm coming back. All these things, but they didn't get it. They didn't process it. And as I was thinking about this, it was reminding me of us, right? Because we know what Jesus has said. We see in Scripture he makes promises to us. We see the ways he's worked in our lives and the lives of people that we love. But it's so easy to forget that and to not have hope and not have hope for what is to come. A quote from a pastor and theologian says, biblical hope is something you are very sure about. It just hasn't happened yet. It's something you look forward to with great anticipation. So rather than being something that we're like, I don't know, it's something we know, no, that's going to happen, and I'm sure of it, and I'm looking forward to that. And so as believers in Jesus, right, the big thing that we can have hope for is the resurrection. So as we're in Saturday, right, we're looking forward, we know the end of the story, we know that Jesus has risen from the dead, and we know that we have hope that Jesus says or God says in Scripture that He will make all things new. So we have this hope beyond this life and the things that we can see. We have hope beyond that. Hebrews 6:19 through 20 says, we have this hope, some of you guys might know this, if you know it, say it with me, as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. It enters the inner sanctuary behind the curtain where Jesus, who went before us, has entered on our behalf. That was the memory verse at summer camp that some of us have been to or worked at. Yes. So this talks about hope being an anchor for our soul. And it refers to being behind the curtain, which is talking about the Holy of Holies, which we talked about a little bit in the temple. When Jesus was crucified, the veil was torn so that we have access to the Father. So it talks about hope being this anchor for us. So this means that in the midst of the craziness, that when we look around our world and we see acts of violence being perpetrated, when we see people who are ill and sick that we love, when we see things that are disheartening, we know that we can have hope. We know that we have this thing that is firm and secure, so that in the midst of all of these things, we have hope in God's promises. We see throughout Scripture, God makes all kinds of promises to us. A few of those are on here. Can I get someone to read the first one for me? Joshua 1:9. Macy, will you read this?
Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go.
God promises that He will always be with us. That wherever we go, we do not need to be afraid because He is with us. Isaiah 43, verse 1. Piana.
Do not be afraid, for I have ransomed you. I have called you by name, you are mine. When you go through deep waters, I will be with you.
Again, here we see God telling us that He has ransomed us, which we see through Jesus, right? That's what the promise He's making here is that through the death and resurrection of Jesus, we will be bought back, we'll be redeemed, and that we are His. And that when we go through deep waters, and we go through those difficult times, that He will be there with us. And then finally, in the book of Revelation, which is the very last book of the Bible, Revelation 21. Someone read this verse for us. No.
Look, God's home is now among His people. He will live with them, and they will be His people. God Himself will be with them. He will wipe every